So here we are on campus where I work. I brought Elena with me. Entonces estamos trabajando en mi despacho, ¿verdad? Sí. ¿Qué estás comiendo? Este es nuestro second breakfast. Es decir, estamos almorzando aquí en el parque, al lado de mi despacho, del edificio donde trabajo. Y allá en la biblioteca. De hecho, acabamos de ir a la biblioteca. ¿Por qué hemos ido a la biblioteca? Para devolver... ¿qué? ¿Un libro? Un libro de Yorùbá, ¿verdad? ¿Y cómo se llamaba ese libro? Alawiye. ¿Qué tienes en la boca? ¡Ay! En boca cerrada.
No entran moscas.
No entran moscas. Eso significa que no hay que hablar. Elenita, no hables. Tienes que tragar antes de hablar. Uy. Qué mala educada. Bueno, estás aprendiendo a ser buena damita, ¿verdad?
Sí, papá.
A ver, ¿qué estás comiendo? ¿Qué estás almorzando ahí?
Pan con crema de cacahuete.
Pan, no es pan. Es como tortita.
Con crema de cacahuete.
Con crema de cacahuete, exacto. Muy bien. Sí, so we just returned a book, Yoruba textbook for kids. That we were looking at for using to teach our kids and whatnot. It's pretty crazy when it comes to Yoruba. It's pretty wild because all the textbooks in Yoruba, like the best ones, are from, 1960s, 1950s. We even found one from, I think, the 40s, I want to say. And they're basically like research books now. Like they're only meant for research because they're so old, they're kind of falling apart. Because many of them were just printed, in the 40s, 50s, just on a few pieces of paper. Not even that good of paper, pretty, soft paper. And then stapled, and those staples are rusted by now because it's just hard to keep books in a non-climate controlled environment in a tropical area. So it's pretty wild. But anyways, those are the books that made their way to the United States and other universities. Some of the books I had to get from I think there was a... Uy, huele, ¿estás bien? Uy, ¿quieres andar un poquito? Sí, bueno, andemos un poquito. So yeah, some of those books I got from like interlibrary loan from different universities, as far away as I think there was one from Hungary, one from Syria, a couple of different places, Boston, Spain actually has a lot, which is surprising. La Biblioteca Nacional de España, creo. But yeah, there's a number of universes kind of scattered around. So trying to find different versions, different years, but also different like the different editions of these textbooks they're kind of hard to find. And it's not just the editions. It's because the best ones are definitely the original editions. I mean, there's other editions later on, like the 80s, 90s, things like that. If we're looking at like Alawiye, which is one of the most important ones, which is crazy because Alawiye, again, it was published in the 60s, 50s, stuff like that. And actually, my mother-in-law, so my wife's mother, she grew up learning from those textbooks. So it's pretty neat because a lot of the stories, like the cultural stories, the ones that were passed down orally, from generation to generation in Yoruba, which are really the most important, because none of them were really written. They were written by this man who wrote Alawiye, and so he wrote those down and used them for teaching. Has like comprehension questions and stuff after each story, reflective questions, things like that. And it's really neat. It's really good for kids, and there's different levels. So it starts with Elena, ¿cómo es? Alawiye, ¿cuál es el primero? Ala wiye.
Iwe kata.
No, iwe keta. Rara. Iwe.
Kani.
Iwe keni. Ah, I always forget that first one. I know keji, keta. Acabamos de leer iwe. ¿Cómo es? Iwe keji. Entonces, iwe. ¿Qué acabas de decir? No. No, ¿cómo es?
Many.
Y Carrie, yeah. Entonces, el primer libro, la primera edición, bueno, ¿cómo es? No, el primer nivel, digamos, es... ¿quieres sentarte de nuevo? So, like, the first level, actually, I don't even know if we found the first level. Elena, tenemos a la... ¿Cómo es la primera? ¿Cómo es? Iwe... Kenny, gracias. Entonces, Iwe Kenny, ¿tenemos?
Sí.
Yeah? Oh, okay. I didn't know we had the first one. Anyways, so yeah, we found... ¿Ardilla? No, ¿eso qué es? No es ardilla, ¿qué es? ¿Qué es?
Estaba allí.
Ya, estaba ahí, estaba corriendo, pero no ha sido ardilla. ¿Qué ha sido? Conejo. Ha sido un conejo. ¿No lo habías visto? Bueno, iba muy rápido. Pero bueno, ya se ha escondido ahí detrás del sauce o ¿cómo se llame? Ese árbol. Anyways, I was talking about the books. Yeah, so the Alawiye books, they've really, captured the culture a lot. According to my wife, a lot of the stories that her mom told her, she thought they were passed down, but evidently they weren't. Or probably not. They were probably passed down through those books that she learned from. So that's pretty wild. So these books actually kept the culture alive, and they still use them to this day, these same textbooks. But the reason why there hasn't really been any new textbooks is just the change of culture. Because in the 60s, around the time of just before and during the process of gaining independence from Great Britain, Elena, ¿qué estás haciendo? Ay. No toques nada y en particular no te metas nada en la boca. Ven aquí. Ven. Anda, siéntate. Elena, siéntate aquí, junto a mí. So yeah, the interesting thing about the Alawiye books and whatnot is the fact that anyways, it came about during the time of independence, things like that. Native languages were considered important. They were training, children in those languages, etc. And then as they grew up, learning English, that was kind of how they were doing it. It was pretty good. But I guess over time, people just got so interested in, business and internationalness and always looking outside of the country that nowadays people look at kind of like most colonized countries, actually, thinking about like Latin America, things like that. It's the same thing. Now they're, instead of valuing their languages, instead of valuing, where they come from and everything. ¿Qué estás haciendo? ¿Qué tienes ahí en la mano? ¿Qué es eso? Crema de cacahuete en el dedo sucio. Límpialo aquí. Anda, límpialo. No debes meterlo en la boca, ¿vale? Eso es asqueroso. Anyways, so unfortunately, Nigeria got fairly quickly, especially after 80s and whatnot, and once things started opening back up in the 90s and all, they got much more like other countries, other colonized countries like in Latin America, where they no longer seem to really care a whole lot about el agua está aquí, tu agua está ahí. They no longer seem to care so much about their own languages, and it was more looking outside about maybe leaving the country, going somewhere else. Maybe the grass is greener, but also the idea that advancement means English. Education means English, and their native languages, which they used to appreciate and see as, hey, Oh. ¿Qué hora es, Elena? ¿Mm? ¿Qué hora es? ¡Ey, ey, ey! No, no lo toques. A ver. Ah, no es una hora, ¿verdad? Son las, ¿cómo es? Las 10 y... No, las 11 menos cuarto, creo. Anyway, so... no toques eso. Anda, anda. Corre al árbol y después vuelve. Ah, aquel árbol. Sí, aquel. Ahí, sí, sí, sí. Ahí, ahí. Tócalo y después vuelve. Rápido, rápido. Corre, corre. Está un poco mojadito con el rocío. No pasa nada, ¿eh? That might take her a moment. Walking as carefully as she is. Anyways, yeah, so Nigeria ended up, yeah, just basically becoming like a lot of other countries where they didn't value their native languages as much. And so that's kind of fallen to the wayside. Now, I mean, there's some political things that they're trying to do, like in Lagos recently. They're like, oh, everyone needs to learn Yoruba. This is a Yoruba, original Yoruba area. So anyone who comes here should learn Yoruba in school. That should be one of their, one of the languages, or at least maybe even, the language of instruction, things like that. I think they're getting a lot of pushback from that. I don't think that's going to work too well. But anyways, what I'm trying to get to is in the modern era, that's why there are no real good Yoruba books. That's why we have to go back, way back to then, to find like good textbooks for children that have good, content. I mean, you can find a few modern like children's books that have been either translated or are, from the diaspora, things like that. But the thing is, those are so modern. Like, it's just talking about, hamburgers and ice cream and stuff like that, because they're expecting the kids to be living in, Great Britain or United States, somewhere like that, Australia. They don't really, expect them to be caring to learn about, basic cultural things. Elena, estás rompiendo la universidad. Uy, tira eso. She just pulled up something from the... Ay, ay, ay. Siéntate, siéntate. Deja de romper la universidad. Anda, tienes 3 palos. Tienes 3 palos ahí. No necesitas más cosas. Anda, siéntate bien, como buena damita. Ay. So, long story. But basically, what we're trying to get at is that's why we use these really old textbooks. Ancient little things, little pamphlets really is what they are. But they do a fantastic job. They've got really nice illustrations and things. And yeah, they do a really good job. I thought about, working together to write up a couple of our own. But really, I mean, these Alawi, they have a lot of the cultural things that I wanted to teach the kids, like village living and stuff, and using the Odo or Modo, things like that, in the village, how it works, things like that, to prepare food, to farming, the old ways of doing things, because that's where a lot of this, this vocabulary, this important vocabulary comes from, and the ways of speaking, turns of phrase, all those kind of things. That's where a lot of those things come from. So I wanted the kids to learn that no matter where we lived. And yeah, I was planning on trying to write it ourselves, trying to make somehow illustrations, even though none of us, my wife and I, were not really artists in that sense. But we were trying to think about how to do it. But I mean, Alawi is really the best way. So for right now, that's what we're going to try to use. Elena, a ver, ¿vas a despedirte? ¿Qué les dices?
Ciao.
Ciao. Ciao. Hope you enjoyed this video.